watch this theory-wise video. Why MMOs are going backwards.
This is where wins meet. It just released and is at the peak of its popularity. It's not really an MMORPG, more a MORPG, a multiplayer online game, and even then, very light on those elements. But in many ways, it's conceptually what I envisioned the MMO genre to look like 15 odd years ago. Just look at this game. It's gorgeous, vibrant, dense, detailed. Add a couple hundred players on screen and teenage theory-wise, busy WoW rating would have been in awe. And this is old school RuneScape, which has double the concurrent players online right now.
Damn.
So something is clearly up, right? This is not normal, but I think it can be perfectly explained. At this point, it's common knowledge that so many of the best MMOs are well over a decade old, not just because new ones aren't released.
I said that I've been saying this for a while, guys. I don't care what an MMO looks like. I only care if, like, pretty much what I care about is, are there people playing it? Because if there's people playing it, then it's good. And if there's a lot of people playing it, then there's hype. And hype is half of what makes an MMO good. If nobody's playing it, I don't want to play. That's as simple as that. It doesn't matter what it looks like, but it looks pretty good.
But because there's something missing from them. A couple videos ago, I discussed a pervasive failure in modern MMO design, as they struggle to be worth checking out after their release. Once a new MMO launches, you have only a month or so to hop on the bandwagon or be left behind, with new zones, new items, new systems, and seasons creating a jambalaya of overwhelming onboarding. We talked about how seasonality is a way to create soft resets, but deduced that...
Yeah, I guess so. Like, some people might not want to play the game if they get left behind, but isn't that kind of the magic of RuneScape? Is like, it doesn't really matter if you're behind because your progress is forever saved. It's not really a seasonal game. In a way, I guess it does. I guess like retail WoW works in its own way where it's like, yeah, you reset at the beginning of every season. You have a chance to go again. But in RuneScape, there's no resets, but people still play. It's just a forever MMO. And I guess both of those extremes kind of work where you're getting resets. You either get resets all the time or you never get resets. One of the two kind of works.
Leapfrogging new players into the endgame doesn't connect them with the world and their character. They end up being even more overwhelmed by all the changes, and due to the limited time season ticking away in the background, feel rushed to learn. More often than not, people quit MMOs just a couple hours after picking them up, whether they boost to endgame or don't. And that's a failure of foresight, but another trend that many have noticed is a return to the past. Not just in older MMOs retaining popularity, but even newer ones harkening back to a bygone era. Back before fleshed out wiki pages and streamlined seasons, when downloading a game felt like stepping into a new world, when this genre, the MMORPG, was at the height of its popularity. This was always interesting to me because I grew up hearing about the next generation of MMOs that will
WoW launch right
pave the
there.
way to a golden future for the genre.
This is how I remember it.
Like, well, like something next gen, fancy, instead of looking like this. We aren't buying VR headsets and prancing around photorealistic worlds. We're evolving backward, recognizing values that might have been underappreciated for their time, and marketing toward demographics that prefer systems over flashy gameplay. I always believe that the best games are those that foment thought after you finish playing. If you go to bed theory crafting a build, or figuring out a path, or considering options for itemization, you're got. Because that's what develops connection. The gaming market is so wide today, with hundreds of options at our fingertips, locked behind simple subscriptions and rapid downloads. We live in a time of abundance, and that is never more clear than with just how many games we can play at any given time. In response to this, MMOs have pivoted in their live service models. They don't focus on long-term engagements, but rather short-form with recidivism, meaning you play for short bursts of time, but return with every new release, a new patch, season, raid, and so on. This pivot fits the paradigm of most live service models. They work the same way. Huge player count spikes on any given launch, and then severe dips once the majority chews through the content. The more seasonal a game is, the more it is prone to this sporadic form.
It's because we all play the game so much nowadays. Like, we're all degens. It seems like we just have so much time to play video games that, especially now with streamers, and these new MMOs don't really release with a lot of in-game content, and then the game just dies. And then when people aren't playing, then nobody wants to play.
And that works for match-based shooters like Call of Duty or Battlefield, as well as other hyper-competitive match-based games such as League of Legends or Valorant. It doesn't apply as cleanly to an MMO. It transforms a persistent world into a persistently resuscitated one. Joining an MMO season at the tail end of its runtime is akin to traveling through an abandoned theme park. The rides are there, but no one is using them. To me, an MMO is most successful when always having enough people populating its world, but that may not be possible with all that abundance I mentioned earlier. And yet, something is amiss. While retail WoW and Final Fantasy XIV are popular, it wouldn't be far-fetched to suggest that classic WoW is dominating discourse. Old school RuneScape is actually seeing growth, quite a lot of it too. What is causing people to forego the present, the polished, the norm, the short-form seasons, and the constant pull toward other?
Are WoW and RuneScape the most popular MMOs right now on the planet? I mean, is that a fact, or is there like another one that's more popular? New World is dead. Final Fantasy XIV as well. I mean, is it a coincidence that those 3 MMOs have been around for the longest? I feel like they've been around a very long time. They've had so much time. Like, there's so many Final Fantasy expansions. That's kind of what it takes nowadays to build an MMO. It takes so much time and development time to like make a good MMO.
Other games. Why are so many fans going back in time? I've had this video scripted for a while, so when Jagex reached out to me to sponsor a project, I couldn't think of a better place to put it. Old school RuneScape has been an MMO I've spoken about a lot on this channel, so viewers are likely aware that I'm not just reading an ad when I say that it's doing something pretty damn unique in the MMO space. That's never been more clear than with the release of its first ever new skill, Sailing, the biggest update in the game's history, launched on November 19th, one I have been a proponent of for a long time and have been eagerly awaiting. I'm actually playing it now as I'm speaking. This skill is a blend of old school ideas and modern design philosophies, blending the long-term satisfaction of old school RuneScape with all kinds of incredible activities. Chart the seas, discover islands, salvage shipwrecks, solve riddles, battle sea monsters, and challenge your wits with the Barracuda trials. And that's just the start of it too. You can upgrade your boat, complete brand new quests, and discover all the incredible ways sailing has been integrated with the game. Best of all, it's there for everyone. It's not endgame content. You don't need to play for 1,000 hours to experience it.
That's one thing kind of cool about RuneScape is like it's such a sandboxy type of game. You could choose your own. You could choose whatever you want to play. It's all a bunch of mini games inside of one game, and you kind of choose what you want to level up. If you're soda popping, you just go straight to Temporos and never leave. You know what I mean? Like that's just what some people do. It's kind of cool. You can just play it your own way, and it is like a lot of just different games inside of one.
Simply log in on a member's account and set sail. If you're new to RuneScape, use the handy link in the description to get started. Thanks again, and let's get back to the topic. But that was kind of the topic, right? I'm pretty sure everyone who skipped that ad is very confused right now, but that's why that ad was so perfect for this video. I promise I'm not shilling when I say that old school RuneScape has seen immense growth over the past 2 years by more than 30 to 40% because of the developers and players' synergy with envisioning a long-term future for this funny little British point-and-click adventure game. There is absolutely no universe where something like this can have over 3 million subscribers.
Dude, old school RuneScape is pretty unique in the sense that, like, let's say you're going to try to make an OSRS killer. You want to make OSRS, but better. Better graphics, better systems, same type of, like, sandbox, world, skilling, everything. And the actual company that made OSRS tried to do that and they couldn't even do it. So why would you even assume that like another company could come in and make an OSRS killer when the actual company that made OSRS couldn't even do it? OSRS is just something special, man. A lot of times they just get it right on the first try and it's all by accident. And I feel like that's a lot that happened in Classic WoW too. The devs even admitted it. That's why it's just so good. A lot of it was just accidental.
And yet, it does. What the hell? MMOs are odd in their retrospection. It's rare that an entire genre takes steps back to mitigate mistakes in the present, the most prominent of which is the filing down of friction in service of approachability. I just talked about friction in my prior video, so I don't want to retread topics too much, but I will summarize friction as follows. Obstacles in game design that are meant to pace your journey and create satisfaction. Friction is both intentional and
I got a hell of a lot of friction right now farming these runes for the Inferno, I'll tell you that. Iron Man got too much friction for me.
not. A bad UI is a source of friction, one which likely isn't an overall positive. Meanwhile, a grind in an MMO is also a source of friction, and that is one of the most defining features of the entire genre.
I'm
to
fricked
me,
up.
You can't have
I'm
an
fricked
MMO
up.
without grinds. That's how you create persistence and how MMOs manage
I'm
to
freaking
tap
my
into
shit right
different
now.
skill sets than most other genres, valuing patience over reaction times. Friction is deceptively challenging to design around. It's an incredibly fine balance, like threading a needle. It's also subjective. If you have 1 hour a week to play a game, a 30-hour grind is a multi-month long process for you. That may be too much friction, but if you can play 30 hours a week, then it's likely doable, especially if the reward is deemed worth it. My favorite example of friction is in the From Software Souls series, including Bloodborne and Elden Ring. These are games that are notoriously high on friction, too high for some people. That has been the case ever since Demon's Souls and Dark Souls 1, facing 3 separate paths from Firelink Shrine,
Didn't he just say he wasn't going to talk about friction?
little to no guidance in itemization, and over a dozen stats to begin calculating and understanding. But as players became better at these games, the designers started to increase difficulty in an effort to retain the balance of friction for existing fans. What they may not have considered, though, is new players, those who don't have 3 preceding titles to hone.
Yo, have you considered Revenants for GP? Caleb? Yeah, but no as well. It could be a waste of time. I definitely can't do it on stream, so I don't know. I don't know if I want to try that.
Their talents on. Picking up Dark Souls 1 after beating Dark Souls 3 is like playing a Kirby game. It's so much simpler to beat. So how do we thread this needle for all players, new and returning? That's where From Software did something simple yet genius. Instead of seeing difficulty as a boss moveset or the required speed of a reaction or a memory of a level layout, they saw it more broadly. The bosses continued to get harder, but the friction of spending minutes running back to try them again was softened by adding this, Stake of America in Elden Ring. A mini checkpoint that you spawn at when you die. Most challenging areas and bosses have one nearby, meaning that if you do end up getting pummeled, you aren't faced with arduous runbacks where you question whether this game is even worth playing.
I never
anymore.
played Elden Ring,
Rather,
guys.
a
Not a
couple
single
seconds
time.
to recoup and back into the arena you go.
Never
By
played it.
alleviating the friction of pathing to service the friction of combat, they created a game that became their most popular ever, all the while offering much more challenging boss encounters than any preceding title. By balancing both those friction points, you thread the needle and motivate further attempts after failure.
Oh,
Other
shit.
games expanded even further on this, with the first Berserker Kazan having incredibly challenging boss fights, but placing you just outside their arena upon dying. Additionally, you gain the experience equivalent of the game, allowing your failures to actually raise your stats to soften difficulty further. As someone who isn't as interested in the ball-crushing bosses in Souls games, I was surprised to have beaten the entirety of Kazan without a single
ball-crushing?
AI companion to help, because it was so easy to try again. So how does this all apply to MMOs? To start, we should recognize how removing friction isn't always the right thing to do. The difficulty of Souls games is part of their success and what creates the satisfaction associated with them. but if they were to ratchet up difficulty tenfold, then too few players would gain that satisfaction in the first place. That's the balance. And over time, MMOs struggled to retain relevance in a games market that was exponentially growing and phasing them out, due in part to their required long-term commitments, which is a source of friction. In response, MMOs began to file those things down.
Yeah, I mean, your natural thought as a developer is like, people are quitting because they don't have the time to play. So let's speed up how fast you can get things. It's like a natural thought. But when you do that, you take away the glory of getting things in the game. And you start trying to cater to an audience that's too broad. And that's why they say RuneScape is a niche audience, but it caters to that niche audience very well, is because it doesn't bend the knee to like nerfing grinds. The grinds are absolutely insane. They're for insane people. RuneScape is for insane people that want a like forever grind. And that's why we're all playing it, is because we're all insane. And that's why we like the game, is because it's for us. When you start catering your game to too many people, it's not niche anymore. It's not catering to anyone. And that's why like Classic WoW and OSRS have niche audiences, but they're loyal forever. They never stop playing the game.
Studios, executives, investors all look toward successful examples of live service models and mimic them to the best of their abilities. For an MMO that resulted in grinding down the edges, shortening playtime, creating more catch-up systems, and quadrupling down on seasonality in support of the prior two features. They turned MMOs into something you can pick up and play in about the same time you can Battlefield. Just download the game, get offered a free boost, and you're ready to go. I don't have to spell out the fact that this model clearly didn't translate as well as one might expect. Go figure that crunching down all the nuance in a genre known for complexity in favor of making it more palatable, you end up not really appealing to those who enjoy the genre in the first place. This may be a hot take, but I genuinely believe this is the largest reason why the genre stagnated so much. While other genres took elements of the MMO, the RPG, and integrated them seamlessly into their pre-existing bodies, such as the RPG-esque progression system seen in most FPS shooters today, MMOs simply couldn't contort themselves in a manner that retained their most beloved features. If you're trying to sell a persistent world, then creating an ecosystem where most people who play it do so for only a couple weeks undermines that entire premise. The reason why someone remembers a world, feels connected to it, isn't just because they experienced it as children during their most formative years, but because they did so consistently over time. I'm not even sure how much age has to do with this in the first place. A great example is my experience with two different worlds, Azeroth and Gielinor. The former is Warcraft setting, one I have played and lived in for many years. I've learned all the hidden nooks and crannies of individual zones and feel extraordinarily connected to them, especially having played through 2019's re-release of Vanilla World of Warcraft, when leveling still meant something. The journey one takes from 1 to 60 isn't just a tutorial or a couple hours at a theme park. It's about as evocative an adventure as one could have in a seamless open world. By the time you finally ding 60, you aren't just familiar with the locales or confident in navigating their dangers, you are part of them. You look at each zone as a...
So one thing that I like about RuneScape is like, you see how Tyler 1 is in this area right here? This area is for like 25 to 40 or 20 to 40-ish range, but you never really go back to, you never really go back to the Tarn Mill area after late game. Like, you never really have a good reason to go back to this area. I really like that Jagex will put high level stuff in the low level zones. And it gives you reasons to go back there, whether it's like a dungeon, a Slayer dungeon, a world boss, a Grandmaster quest that takes you back to the zones. They do such a good job at like using the map. imagine if you just went like right to left across the map, you ended up in one zone and you primarily just stayed there at the end game. In all of the previous zones, you never visited them again because you had no reason to go back there. And that's one thing that I think that Classic WoW needs to do, is they need to reuse their zones better so that you're continuously immersing yourself in all of the zones, even at end game. Give people reasons to go back there. Have high level stuff in low level areas, kind of like the Green Drakes in Hinterlands. The Green Drake area is like a very end game zone, but Hinterlands is like a level 50 zone. So it gives you a reason to go back there maybe for those Drakes, but RuneScape just kind of does it better in a way. And I would like to see more of that in Classic Plus, is like reasons to go back to low level zones.
A collection of personal stories that took place. That time you were ganked and spawn camped in Stranglethorn by that piece of shit rogue, when you teamed up with your friends to maraud through the Wailing Caverns, when you pulled every Defias pillager somehow, and when you finally turned in that last quest or killed that final mob. It's all meaningful and memorable only because of the friction that paced it out. The fact that quests were so sporadic that sometimes you'd take a 30-minute string of flight paths just to hand in a couple more and squeak out that level advantage over the next area is what made the environments feel lived in despite their aged graphical fidelity. I genuinely didn't think a location could mean more to me in a video game. Yet, that was disproven. Twice. The Lands Between and Elden Ring is my favorite fantasy setting ever put into a game, maybe just ever, game or not. And of course, Gielinor. My first 1,000 hours in old school RuneScape saw me develop a similar kind of bond with the universe. It may not be as graphically immersive, but thanks to old school's incredibly deep systems stemming in major part from their interconnected skills and the fact that OSRS is more a sandbox than a theme park, bred a compelling connection. You don't out-level areas in old school.
Yeah,
I found myself
this.
visiting the starting zone, Lumbridge, just as much as I did one of the most dangerous areas in the game, maybe even more. The beauty of creating a persistent world, and one
Yeah, Shobek used to visit Lumbridge a lot too when I watched his stream.
which doesn't devalue its space, made me fall in love with an entirely different universe. To be corny for a moment, it was magical, and I genuinely feel sorry for many MMO players out there who lack this kind of home, in part due to the flitting nature of games today. They bounce between Retail WoW, FF14, Black Desert, Guild Wars 2, ESO, all in hopes that they'll stick for longer than a couple weeks at a time. And they just don't. Everything I just said is a major reason why I created a YouTube channel in the first place. I felt like my experience spoke to a deeper desire in a community that feels alienated by its favorite genre. To be clear, for some people, that is exactly the kind of thing they're looking for. So I don't want to sit here and say all MMOs need to be super grindy and long-term like RuneScape, just that I think the vast majority of popular MMOs have defaulted to a paradigm that isn't sustainable in the long term. And many new games that are grindy feel like they're grindy for all the wrong reasons, in an effort to facilitate a cash shop. Meanwhile, other games require an inordinately fast-paced content schedule, like we see in Retail WoW that's currently buckling under that demand. Or they fall behind, like we currently see FF14 doing, truly leaving the public conscious for years after an expansion launch. Neither are ideal for an MMO, or at least not ideal for all MMOs. In filing down the friction of grind,
I wonder how many people play Final Fantasy, bro. I don't know anybody that plays that game. And you know why I quit Final Fantasy after I played it? Because the main story questline was like a month long. There was so many... The main storyline, I was trying to get through it all. And I was spacebarring all of it. Like 2 weeks later, I was still doing it. I was like, I just want to play the end game. But dude, the main story questline was awesome, but I wasn't like really a story person. So I feel like if you're a story person, you might enjoy that.
minds, of commitments, of depth and complexity in systems, you are left with something so smooth, so slick, and so palatable that you can't even pick it up, like a oiled up marble.
MSU is 4,000 hours?
Banal ideas.
Holy shit.
But what are some of these ideas in the first place? I do have a couple examples that come to mind. My favorite is the modern style of itemization, something I eventually want to make a separate video on. Many modern MMOs that opted for this kind of frictionless standard have adopted what I like to call a flat plane itemization, meaning that gear and progression in the game is generally derived from a single number, item level, and the statistics on any individual piece of gear become signifiers for classes, jobs, specialization.
This is the worst part about retail WoW. This is all you really care about. You don't care about the name of the item. These stats are kind of whatever. These kind of matter, the green ones, but not really as much as this one. So all you're trying to do is make this number go up. And when that number can't go up anymore, you quit.
And so on. So in World of Warcraft, a warrior needs strength, a mage needs intellect, a rogue needs agility. And those stats don't cross-pollinate. They have no benefit.
Dude, in a simple way, there's not really enough number go up in retail WoW. And I think that's why a lot of people don't tend to not like classic WoW endgame, is because the number stops going up and you max your professions in like a few hours. This is probably why people like RuneScape so much, is because it has so many numbers that go up. And it's so hard to like max. It takes forever to max. That's probably why people like the game so much. They have so many numbers that you can make go up.
Benefit for other classes. The rest is a small conglomerate of barely existent choices that do just about the same thing. Again, in WoW, the 4 secondary stats are versatility, mastery, critical strike, and haste. Versatility and mastery are almost identical. The former just increases your damage and decreases your damage taken. Just so fascinating and interesting, right? Wow, that's just, whoa, that's crazy. Wow, whoa, that's insane. That's so interesting and creative. Whoa. I need to cut that. It's almost as if that could be just lumped into armor,
Okay.
But who am I to say? And mastery is more specialization specific, so it could potentially be interesting. But for most specializations, it's just an increase to their specific damage type. Like for Arms Warriors in the newest expansion, their mastery stat increases their damage while wearing two-handed weapons. Arms Warriors only wear two-handed weapons, so why does this even need to be a statistic? Critical Strike and Haste are marginally more impactful, I guess. Critical Strikes are visible, at least in the damage text, albeit not readily. And Haste decreases your global cooldown, which is actually quite noticeable. So ultimately, there isn't much here, right? And that applies to most MMOs. FF14 has
modern WoW stats are crazy boring. Yeah, bro, it's almost like too simple. Dude, I really loved classic WoW Warrior, where you had to like maintain 6% hit, maintain +5 weapon damage, and then you wanted like 25% crit or 28% crit before you got world buffs until you got crit capped. And then once you're crit capped, then you want to start taking crit out and put more of other stats, and it's like more agility, more strength to get more attack power, because attack power has no crit. And like that to me was the best form of gearing. And in my opinion, the perfect class balance of gearing and like your class is Prot Paladin and TBC. TBC Prot Paladin is the pinnacle of fun in gearing your character to hit minimums, be uncrushable, and pump as much damage and get as much tankiness as possible. And you're constantly balancing every piece of gear that you get for plus damage and tankiness. And you end up tanking in like a dress, because the dress gives you so much plus damage that you stack plate everywhere else, but you tank in a dress for the plus damage. You know what I mean? Like, it's the most interesting combination of any class ever. And I love that. when you play retail and it's just item level and then sack verse mastery, it's so boring. And you don't even know the names of any item that you're getting. There's no like item identity.
Same exact flat plane itemization that WoW does. There really aren't builds that you craft from statistics. The same applies to BDO and of course ESO and Guild Wars 2. The latter two follow this model until you either scale up or cap out, since they have minimal, if any, vertical progression in the endgame. I think there's something to be said, something sad, about seeing an entire genre pivot so wholly away from actual itemization. The kind of buildcraft lost with this change is the defining pillar of old RPGs. It's defining not just in a video game, but in the board games that inspired those video games. These changes were made in response to criticisms at the time. Players said that the items were too specific and therefore difficult to acquire. You need to farm a specific...
Dude, I like how we're all having this conversation about MMOs, and then randomly I read like one comment and it's just like, if you don't like sailing, you must not be a chill guy. I was like, I wonder like what part of the stream that guy's watching. He must be like an hour or two behind, because I know he's not watching the same thing we are. You know what I mean? I just thought that was kind of funny.
Boss for a specific sword with a specific set of stats. Meanwhile, today that sword would be virtually identical to like 10 other swords obtainable from 10 other pieces of content. The benefit is, of course, less friction. You get the item faster and in a more diverse way. But the cost is the entire concept of itemization, the entire communal perception of what items are, how they cease to have an identity when they don't have unique effects or meanings to individual players. I don't know about you, but that's a really, really big cost. It's like getting a nasty paper cut and then chopping off your arm to stop the bleeding. WoW wasn't always like this either. The itemization in Classic and even in the first expansion, the Burning Crusade, was delightful. I played a Protection Paladin in Burning Crusade, a truly novel take on a tank, as it used spell power to generate threat, meaning the items that you wanted weren't just traditional tank pieces with defense ratings and high stamina. You wanted spell power weapons and spell power rings to facilitate aggro. You also had to balance a defense rating soft cap that prevented you from being crittable by bosses. On top of all of that, you also needed...
Damn, look at him. He's talking about TBC Paladin. Told you guys. TBC Paladin is prime. The best class design ever in an MMO.
High enough stamina to sustain. Effectively, it was a puzzle. You kept old items while obtaining new ones because you were constantly considering how you can slot in a new piece while retaining your tankiness. It did that thing I mentioned all the way back at the start of the video, where I went
pre-watch, brother. I've been saying that for years. I've been saying that for years, brothers.
To bed constantly thinking
Everybody knows
about
this.
the next
Everybody
puzzle
knows
piece,
this.
the next item to slot carefully into my current setup. It made itemization not static, because you had to adapt with the pieces you had rather than just following a linear path to get what you need. It's funny because that's actually very similar to the kind of itemization that old school RuneScape has, and arguably is why I connected.
Yeah, I mean, look at my gear that I'm doing freaking Inferno with. I mean, very few people will ever do the Inferno with the exact same items that I'm doing it with. Like, there's so many different items and combinations that you can do Inferno. That, you know, that makes us like, we're all different. You know, I got Ring of Shadows, Guthix D'hide, Rada's Blessing too, and I just recently got an Anguish, but before that I was using a Dragon Bone. And then I'm using Blue Moon Chestplate with Ancient Scepter upgraded and a Crystal Shield. You know, these are a lot of the pieces are meta, but some of them are not. And it's great because you're able to weave different gear in there and get it done.
So much with it. The idiocy of destroying depth in favor of brain off, what does the item level number say gearing, to me, ruins an RPG. I don't even know if that's a hot take, considering every single beloved and critically acclaimed RPG that has released in the past half decade had depth to its buildcraft. I mean,
so
Baldur's
the
Gate...
point here, guys, is if you're going into a boss fight, you should have to think about what gear you're going to bring to it. You should have to do critical thinking. RuneScape has that. Retail WoW doesn't have that. You have the same set of gear for everything. You will rarely ever change your gear. Maybe your trinket. Maybe. You take the same gear to every Mythic Plus, every raid, every single world boss, quest, everything. It is boring. Gear should be not be just a standard baseline thing. Having to think about what gear you're bringing to the fight is one of the most fun parts of the game. And like, you get an upgrade, you're happy. Like, oh, I just got an upgrade. I'll probably only use it on this boss, but like whenever I do that boss, like at least it's an upgrade, you know? And that's super cool. RuneScape does that the best.
A3 is a great example of a game that fully placed builds in the hands of their players and trusted them to be intelligent and thoughtful with what they chose. The same applies to Elden Ring. Because MMOs were terrified of being overly complex, they filed down the edges of itemization and birthed a model that fundamentally disconnects gear from your character. Items may as well be invisible, especially with overrides and cosmetics dominating the space. The takeaway shouldn't have been to simplify, but to retrospect. The market for video games is still growing. More people play today than 10 years ago, meaning that the slice of pie you're fighting for has exponentially grown too. The market cap that WoW was breaching at the height of its popularity in 2009 is but a fraction of what it is today, and that's proven true by niche titles like Baldur's Gate and of course difficult games like Elden Ring selling millions of copies in the span of a week. Niche is the new norm. You can market to a niche demographic and get the kinds of eye-watering returns companies only dreamt of a decade or two ago. Look at Silksong, one of the most difficult games of the year, peaking at almost 600,000 concurrent players. And that's just on Steam, an indie game made by a handful of developers that sells difficulty, sells friction as one of its most essential features. It's not just hard in its combat encounters, but just about everywhere. Runbacks are long, many argue too long. The navigation can sometimes feel obtuse. A lack of standard map gets you lost and confused, and yet it's adored. Games have become ubiquitous, so why are MMOs still so scared? To go back to Where Winds Meet for a moment, this game is a perfect representation of visual fidelity in a seamless open world, but isn't inhabiting the
This game looks like a better BDO.
kinds of features one would expect an MMO to have.
Cleaner. It looks like a cleaner BDO, less like particle, sun shafts, flares. It looks realistic, but not too realistic. I think it's a good visually. It's visually pleasing, and none of it is like taking me out of the world or like anything like that. It looks good, I think.
It may be flashy, fun, free to play, and thankfully missing the pay-to-win gacha systems many games of its ilk have, but it's also a demonstration of the kind of frictionless systems that wouldn't work in an MMO. For a moment, let's put aside those that exist specifically due to its free-to-play nature, such as the obnoxious daily energy system that plagues every single game like this. We have that same simplistic itemization I talked about earlier, a cosmetic-driven armor system, and of course, little personal choice in the character building process. It works quite well as an action RPG, yet would have distinctly failed as an MMO, at least in my eyes. On the other hand, old school RuneScape came about as a result of this kind of genre evolution.
Bro, I think it's so funny when you pull up old school RuneScape and it's like 50% or like 60% UI and like 40% game. The whole screen.
Or de-evolution,
so funny.
Birthed by company and developer-specific mistakes that negatively impacted the game all the way back in 2012. As the story goes, a poll was launched for a classic version of the game, and it passed. Over time, that version lost players until the tiny yet passionate developer team tasked with upkeep gained access to creation tools in the engine and began to release content that was unique to that version of the game. Better yet, this was all done via the game's most distinct feature, the polling system. It's still polled to this day. The developers pitch ideas and players curate them, acting like editors at a news station. While the reasons for its existence aren't based on the issues I outlined earlier in the video, they are representative of cultural shifts and collective realization. It began with osrs, but was popularized in the MMO space in 2019 during the classic WoW release, when millions upon millions of players flocked to a world that at one point Blizzard clearly didn't care much about, considering just how different it feels in the retail game. While this was never outright said by Blizzard, the launch of Classic WoW in 2019 was likely as a result of old school RuneScape's success and their inspiration from that. If I had to guess, the predominant reaction from the higher-ups at Blizzard after seeing the success of Classic WoW was, "Oh shit, people still actually like this."
Yep.
The assumption, much like the one during old school RuneScape's release, was that people will play it a little bit, relive some nostalgia, and leave. But after unique updates were added to osrs and the content cadence of Classic WoW remained quick, that didn't really happen. Now, the Classic WoW trajectory is...
I can't really believe that Classic WoW hasn't gotten updates after they saw how well that it worked in osrs. Dude, osrs started getting updates 11 or 12 years ago, and it continued to grow in popularity. Like, why did it take Blizzard so long to even start considering Classic Plus? They weren't even going to bring back the old game. They didn't even bring back the old game, like re-release it, until 2019. And now we're in 2025, almost 2026, and we're still like, we're finally getting what OSRS has, which is Classic Plus, at least we think.
Obviously that of lowering player counts because it released to such publicity and novelty. Additionally, the game continues to modernize. The future patches are just re-releasing every single previous expansion until they get to where we are today. This modernized version of the game doesn't harbor the same nostalgia and excitement that drove players to Classic. The version today is in the Mists of Pandaria expansion, and as expected is seeing a fraction of Classic WoW's release population. It's worth noting just how crazy these initial numbers are, even though we don't have access to them directly. The main source of our Classic population data is from its individual raids logged. This is how many people recorded a raid run, which is important to recognize because while raids are harder in Mists of Pandaria, they don't require hundreds of hours of playtime to even...
Guys, did Blizzard spend all of their money on the marketing and art team? And they got rid of all the other departments? They were like, screw that. We'll just get a marketing and an art team, and that's good enough. We don't need game devs. We don't need game design. We'll just make a badass trailer. Everybody will want to play that shit. Just make a badass trailer. That's all we need, baby. And put one raid in there. Done.
And see. In fact, you can just boost. The reality that this many people leveled to max in Classic WoW and did the endgame content showcases just how enormous its release was. It's part of what makes the prospect of Classic Plus so exciting to WoW players, considering it could, theoretically, capture that same lightning in a bottle and keep it persistent. That does have its own issues, as I outlined in my video on the topic, but there is now a reinvigorated push.
Our team makes more money because they sell cosmetics. True, Knight. Thank you for the
There's something about Classic that is worth keeping. Retail WoW is almost totally disconnected from this older version. It's semi-similar aesthetically, might have some of the same characters, and it's still a tab target MMO, but it systemically isn't really anything like it once was. The difference in these titles is part of what makes their overlapping success important to consider, but also what makes the failures of one be juxtaposed by the successes of the other. What about Classic WoW caused such a resurgence while Retail WoW has been happily gliding along with a stagnated player count, albeit still very popular? At this point, you can probably guess my answer. It's friction, of course. It's the fact that the game world was not only hostile, but demanded your attention in all ways. Not by requiring in-depth rotations or fast-paced, sweaty, moment-to-moment gameplay, but rather patience and planning, crucial features of any traditional RPG. Every item felt impactful. By slowing the pacing down, each step became meaningful. Sure, the quest balance was off. There were enormous lulls in action, long flight paths, corpse runs, obnoxious mob respawn times that pushed players to line up in a queue.
Dude loves
You'd think
friction.
they would consider it a waste of time. After all, they could spend 1/50th that effort and already be max level in retail. Hell, all they need to do is buy the newest expansion and then use the free level boost that comes with it. Except, no, the preference is with this. We don't have exact figures, but if I had to just guess, I would say the first patch of Classic WoW saw more concurrent players than retail had in years, including expansion launches. Every tedious, arduous moment of one's journey to max level, or hell, even to level 10, was imbued with the kind of meaning that defined many of these players' childhoods, not in a nostalgic sense, but as a value. In the same way I played through Elden Ring for the first time and realized, wow, so many of the conveniences in modern RPGs are completely unnecessary if you have meaningful level design to accommodate players. That's not a particularly deep realization, but it is meaningful. These shorthands are qualities of life, but they're qualities only insofar as they are band-aids over failures in design. By stripping away the harsh edges of an MMORPG, you're leaving a smooth surface for your players to glide around and eventually glide off. There's nothing keeping them rooted and committed, gripped. I encourage players to consider the value in spending more time
Karazhan the best raid, bro.
engaged in a single game, even if that goes against the dozens of titles in their Steam backlog. It's part of what makes MMOs so
Kara the
unique,
best raid.
and continuing to lose this element will further deconstruct a genre that, at times, feels like a pale imitation of what it once was. My point is, we're hungry over here. There are people calling the recent Doom survival game an MMO, and I spent a portion of this video talking about where winds meet. Two games that obviously aren't MMOs on any conceivable level, and we all know this. There's just nothing else to compare, and that may just be because of how many large investments have proven to be failures, from SWTOR to more recently, and sadly, New World.
Chat, is Ashes of Creation gonna save us all? Gonna unite every MMO player on Earth together to play one game finally? Was New World a failure? Well, the game developers canceled it, so I'm gonna go with yes.
Games that do have value and merit, yet never saw the kind of success that was demanded by their expensive production. To be anecdotal for a moment, think to the most memorable moments in your favorite MMO, the things that really drew you into the genre. How many of those were just doing a raid boss, or queuing up into a dungeon, or using a level boost? On the other hand, how many of them were unintentional, scary, difficult, annoying, being lost in a zone, confused by a quest, aided by a kind player that set you on the right path? I don't want to assume, so speaking from my experience, the latter is the vast majority. What makes raids memorable is the journey and people you do them with. What makes the world meaningful isn't just a pretty vista or a single player brain off story. It's dying, being lost, and discovering something of your own. It shouldn't surprise anyone that people are resonating with a game that looks like this more than a game that looks like this. After all, these are the same people that fell back in love with a world.
Damn, that shit looks so good though. That shit looks amazing. New World looks so good.
From 2004 over its modern incarnation in 2024. The jagged edge.
It's just that it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It's all about the systems and the number going up, and the gear and the mini games, and the forced socializing with other, interacting with other players. It's so much more than that.
Edges make the best stories. If you're expected to play thousands of hours, then a level of complexity that adds depth is not only a benefit, but a requirement. Funnily enough, many modern MMOs have begun to realize this, from FF14's director commenting on the homogenization of class design being a mistake, to Blizzard adding back branching talent trees inspired by classic WoW into retail. More complex, yes, but far deeper than the weird, banal 3 choice squares that were in the game for a decade up until that point. I'm expecting the
the homogenization of class design thing is like, dude, they kind of just gave everybody, like back in the day, guys, classic WoW, Mage was the best at AoE. Now who's the best at AoE? What's the best AoE class in retail WoW? Anybody know? Every single one of them. They're all good at it. They're all good. Every single class has a badass AoE spec. Instead of changing the game and giving you a reason to bring like a paladin who's a utility guy, who's good at healing, who's good at off healing, good at damage, and they can kind of off tank a mob as well. Instead of giving you a reason to bring a paladin who's like great at utility, nah, just make everybody a mage. Give everybody self-healing. Let everybody be able to heal themselves. Let everybody be able to do AoE. Give everybody great single target. Give everybody big cooldowns. They just like gave everything to every class instead of like trying to design encounters and bosses and dungeons around the unique things that made the classes unique. You know what I mean? Like bring a frost mage if you need to kite this pack. Bring a hunter to drop a frost trap. Those kind of things, like you don't need any of that anymore. You just run in, try to do as much damage as possible. And that's it.
These realizations to be furthered by witnessing future success in this space. We already had countless Kickstarter MMOs conceptualized by veterans in the industry, which, well, didn't go anywhere. Nevertheless, the concept of harkening back to the past has always been there and has always garnered some level of interest. It just requires a deft execution. Today, I think funding for a game like this would be incredibly hard to get. But
they took away the friction, is what I'm trying to say. They took away the friction of the class design. And now there's no more friction, and it feels lifeless. Because the friction is what made us feel alive and unique.
As more long-standing studios refer to the past to inspire the future, I also expect that to change. If Classic Plus launches in a year or two and sees some kind of sustained success over a half-decade, that will once more reinvigorate investors to look favorably upon games that aren't the most visually impressive, but are systemically deep. The challenge there is expecting an investor to understand that. If you're wondering why one can't have both visual fidelity and deep systems, you of course can, but that would require more manpower. The shortcut engines available today, such as Unreal 5, have proven to be inadequate for the MMORPG space, requiring far too much power in a rig to run well, and as a result, alienating the audience. It could be that down the line, that will no longer be the case. But for now, I would be unsurprised if the next big MMO isn't the next-gen near-future evolution that many players still, to this day, believe to be in the cards. It might just look like this. Thank you so much for watching. If you
Good video, theory-wise. I enjoyed that. That was nice kind of talking about MMOs, looking at why other MMOs kind of succeeded and what didn't and what's working with RuneScape and all that. I enjoyed talking about that stuff. Good video, not enough friction. I think there was a lot of friction in that vid. I was a good bit of frick. I was kind of fricked up during that whole thing.